Hello, everyone, and welcome to this day three of our virtual summit 2023. Good morning to those in the US. Good afternoon in Europe and further afield. I hope you're having a good evening. I am looking forward to the session today, and I have with me Emin Oga, who's an IT architect at Digital Catapult. Emin, you just want to give a bit of an introduction to yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Rob, for the opportunity to present. I I started my career in an IoT startup, and then I transitioned into a distribution, and then hence I'm at the IoT at Digital Catapult. I have a background of about 7 years in IoT now. My first ever private sector job was IoT, actually. So ever since I had a fond with IoT, I have experience with cloud technologies as well from multiple hyperscalers, and that's me. Thank you.
Brilliant. Cheers, Emin. And for today's sessions, Emma's going to be taking you through a discussion around the importance of IoT security and automation in a sustainable supply chain, I should say. And I'm very much looking forward to this, like I said. And well, without further ado, Emin, do you want to take the floor?
Absolutely. Thank you. So for those uh, for those of you who do not know Digital Catapult, we consider ourselves to be the UK authority on advanced digital technology, and our mission is to accelerate adoption of advanced digital technologies, driving growth in the UK economy. We create new opportunities through collaboration and innovation, breaking down barriers, de-risking innovation, and opening up new markets. We do this with by identifying the needs, designing, building, and operating physical and digital facilities, creating delivery targeted innovation and acceleration programs, convening and collaborating on research and development. Digital Catapult is increasingly seeing early adopters gain market advantage and growth through the blending of technologies. So we work here where the application of these technologies can make the biggest positive impact. We even run a program called Supply Chain Hub, Digital Supply Chain Hub, which focuses on digitalizing the supply chain in the UK. And those are the three focus areas of our company, as I mentioned. So before diving into the importance of automation and security, I wanted to set some context and give a high level of overview of supply chain issues and also touch on sustainability and then move on to the importance of security. I think those will also reveal when we look at the pain points and how to transition from those pain points, it will also reveal the importance for us as well. So in a typical supply chain story, the materials are on constant move from one stop to another. So starting from raw materials, and then it transitions into manufacturing, assemblies, inventory, warehousing, and then certainly to the customer. While the goods are moving, so does the data with them. So, but supply chain systems, current supply chain systems are not capturing most of that data. So the data is siloed, or even in many systems, like on the field at raw materials level, the data is most probably not even captured. Um, and to touch on the pain points, on the struggles of current supply chain systems. This is a chaotic diagram, to be honest, but focusing on the pillar in the middle. So organizational struggles are collaborating across supply chains, improving sustainability and productivity, and managing resilience. There are reasons on left which you could take, but maybe some that would be bold for this session. Limited supply chain visibility and poor supply demand balancing, inability to respond to shocks, and that leads to some implications that are given on the right hand side. So in a typical story again, as you saw those materials moving from one stage to another, they are most probably in different geographical territories. And in supply chain, you have tiers of suppliers. So you have a retail right in the middle that is just before facing the customer. That's tier 0. You have warehousing, you have assemblies, manufacturers, and you have the primary production sites. And this is just a simple representation, a graphical representation of these nodes. There could be many nodes in each of those layers. And hence, there is a lot of data that is produced on the field, but siloed and not shared. So the materials move from one geography to another, and then it carries the data with them, as I mentioned. In most situations, again, supply chain visibility is limited to a small number of factories or retailer. It is siloed, it is closed, and there is some visibility to one, maybe two higher levels of the chain, but it is very limited, and there is usually no collaboration between the supply chains. So the current state in supply chains there is no reach or visibility. There are no relationships between the nodes in the tiers. There's no trust, no aligned incentives. So the outcome is opacity, chaos, and inefficiency in the operations. Companies tend to focus on monitoring manufactured and financial capitals. However, it is crucial to monitor the human and social and natural capitals in order to develop a truly sustainable and resilient approach. For this, surely you need data metrics to measure, and hence the need for a digital infrastructure. So what is sustainability really? According to a definition from a United Nations report, it is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. So it means basically to optimize the efficiency of our consumption of resources so they continue to exist for future generations. So the factors to consider in sustainability, you have environmental factor where you have the natural capitals, the economy, and there is also the society, the human interactions, where you have the rights of stakeholders, and of course, as we said, there are various nodes and tiers in supply chain systems. There are many stakeholders there as well. So environmentally, you should be considering all of those as well as end customers and other stakeholders as well. So how does the IoT help? Well, IoT is an enabler for sustainable supply chain systems through digitization. devices need to communicate with each other to identify the need for repair, for upgrade, for batteries, etc., etc. And these keep them longer in the market. This is an example of how IoT could help to create a circular economy. It Data metrics and digitalizing the infrastructure will allow to read data metrics and to process them to better understand of product performance, improving design and manufacturing processes. So manufacturing, as you know, is one of the chains in the whole supply chain, and any improvement on that will reflect on the entire supply chain system. And cases like remote monitoring for maintenance, etc., which we will look into later again, will improve the whole supply chain throughout the process, because it can reduce the machine downtimes, which can be a factory floor, or even if data is read from logistics vehicles, it could also improve the operations on that side as well. So, as said, IoT is an enabler for sustainable supply chains through digitization. It can help to digitalize and integrate entires across the supply chain. IoT solutions can retrofit on top of existing systems or transform and connect the entire systems. So not necessarily removing the existing systems, but it can also retrofit into the systems. It can significantly improve the operations in supply chains. For example, routing of items based on weather data. So if there is a storm in an area, the items might need to be rerouted. But to know that, you need to read that data and you need to process it and also connect all those valuable insights together so that you can do that. And then, of course, it can automate to overcome manual tasks that result in inefficiency and lack of accuracy. For example, again, which we will refer later again, in a circular economy, when you have the goods coming back or when they come into a warehouse, you would rather automate the registration and inventory management of that. You could avoid human error in the process by automating a lot of tasks, and you could increase the processing and sharing of data and information, and increase it in the sense that you have more live data than and avoid latencies on reaching out to the market. It can also preempt on blockers such as the machine downtimes, as we mentioned earlier, and for other issues as well. It can secure availability of the items, of the goods, and of the whole entire operational infrastructure. Observing the items across supply chains, increasing the availability of products through preemptive scenarios, and increasing resilience in supply-demand balances with accurate and timely information. So on that, again, if there are no items in inventories and they are unknown and there is a high demand in the market, then that will cause shortage in items. So automating that process will also secure the availability of the goods on the market. So it provides the capability to connect everything together. IoT does. And by processing that information, you can reveal the insights and act upon that. Nevertheless, the IoT market is developing its technology. The technology available is already mature enough to adopt, of course. But just on a point to sustainability, IoT devices are, for example, having energy harvesting capabilities and reducing the form factor and improving signal to noise ratio. So on not only on energy production but also on the consumption side as well, using less energy to do more tasks. There are soft and virtual sensors, and also on the rise is biosensors that are produced from enzymes, etc. So no plastic or metals are used or produced and used. Okay. So how does the automation benefit a supply chain? So one of the pillars that we mentioned in how IoT could help was automation. And as a theme in this session, I wanted to touch on automation in a separate time. So to automating business operations can help with data sharing and data automation and sharing. The example that I had given earlier, which I will touch on again, is, for example, an inventory, a warehouse where the items come back from customers for recycling, for reuse, or for repair. That could, when the data is processed in the right way, to provide and to reveal that it is available, that such item is available, it can help to the access to right materials or to reusable materials on the market. Automation can help tracking, so items routing example that I had given earlier, and tracking of items even in a warehouse system, and where they are and whether they should be there is also a valuable information, and it lies in the tracking system. It improves control and supervision of the entire system. Maintenance alerts is another key area where it can bring in value. So rather than the assets going down, by processing the metrics that are captured from those, you can raise alerts before they go down and be preemptive and overcome that challenge. Again, material flow, registering a product as they are produced, as it comes from the conveyor belt, which this actually also recalls to digital twins. So as the products are coming off the factory line, or even at raw materials, you could register those materials and then have a digital twin of that throughout the supply chain. But of course, digital twins is a separate session of its own. So material flow from resource to end customer and from end customer back into the chain, it can be automated, at least in terms of overcoming the manual tasks, such as registering in the inventory or tracking where it goes and where it comes. And that you could assign SLAs for existing and new business operations. such as servitization, for example, or we know that there are many SLAs that are signed between suppliers, and usually there's a lot of manual tasks there, and it leads to a lot of time consumption and a lot of effort instead of focusing on optimum digital supply chains. It can increase resilience, as mentioned again earlier, by improving the availability and securing the availability of the items as well. So in an ideal sustainable world, you would have reverse logistics for circular economy that supports sustainability. So rather than taking an item from raw materials and to the customer and leaving, you would rather have a chain that takes that item back or that product back, and it adds into the chain again for reusability. This, however, may require the identification of products throughout the system for for suitability in recycling or reusing. So in order to know whether a part or a product can be refitted into another product or can be fixed, each item or product should have an ID, and that identification is necessary throughout the supply chain for tracking and for using it efficiently. For this reason, an automated and integrated system is required to identify and process information about products. So not only registering, but also the parts of the system that can read back, that can re-register, and have an inventory for those products. So in the present supply chain systems, this is not available, and one of the blockers is the manual process of taking those items into the chain. Automating the process through IoT can overcome this challenge and add the products back into the chain. There are various technologies available for this, be it the unique registration and identification of items, be it the processing of data, storing and also identifying data back into the system and matching that identity. So keeping that unique identity can help to track the item or the product throughout its life cycle. So an example, as I have mentioned earlier, you can only purchase circular products if they are available. This is an example, and to do that, you need registering, storing, and sharing information on available assets or products. So accurate information is needed from inventories to enable circular procurement and the development of secondary marketplace that would be cross-sector and enable the availability. So information accuracy and data sharing is at the core of circular economy, but timely information sharing is the key here. So when we were referring to the manual processor earlier, even if in the current setup the circular economy model is adopted, there is a lot of manual work for moving the products and feeding back into the chain, where automation could help overcome that and provide the data and information in a lively manner and up to date. Again, we need a connected world to be efficient. in terms of sustainability. So what is the obvious risk here when we're doing that? We know from the history of technology that connected systems are compromised. So security is one of the key issues in digitization, of course, in all other systems, in all other domains, as well as in IoT. IoT, for that reason, and for many companies, can become a blocker to adopt IoT. There are some example breaches, which we will touch in a minute, and security hence can become a threat to sustainable systems, which we will touch again. But on the other hand, IoT is an enabler for security as well. So if it is thought that having an IoT system can open doors for compromise. But on the other hand, if you think tracking an item, for example, to prevent loss, and many other scenarios as well, as I said. So availability security, which I secure availability, as I mentioned earlier, is another factor here which IoT can overcome. So when it's done in the right way, which you will see in a while, it can become an enabler and it will benefit. But if it's not done in the right way, of course, like any other thing, it can become a blocker and actually do more damage. So this is a snapshot from a website that on the history of security breaches. There has been billions of data records stolen throughout the history. This is only showing from 2015. So we should learn a lesson well as we are looking to connect the world even more, right? But have we learned our lessons? We'll look into that as well. So if I just go back to that, these are mostly websites, or is a particular system, is particular software system that are hacked. There are some others as well, but mostly it's a system, it's a portal, it's a website that has been hacked. When you look at an IoT solution, they are even more complex. You no longer have a software solution or a hardware solution, but a combination of all of those. And you need security measures at all the levels throughout the system. So security shouldn't be an afterthought, but it should be considered as you are even at the design phase. Just to touch on the layers here, you have the edge where you have sensors, you have machines, you have assets, and then you have the connectivity layer where you have various protocols and communication protocols and processing units that you need to consider. And then you have the edge compute, which you have some devices locally, and then you have the storage, a data abstraction layer, you have an application layer, and you have a collaboration and process layer. It is complex in the sense not only does it have multiple layers and multiple technology layers, but also you have multiple options at each level to choose from. So you have to be careful on looking at which options to choose. Of course, there are speed, power, range parameters which you need to consider when you're choosing to have a suitable solution. But also, you have to think of the security and their communication, the communication between one protocol to another. For example, one of the protocols, as you can see, is Zigbee here. It's not only the protocol itself. Sometimes the system that adopts that as well. So Zigbee, for example, it had a flow to compromise Wi-Fi data at home in an example, but and it was used in a smart home product, and it was later patched, but then because there was no access to update the products, it took quite a long time to overcome that. So it is this is one of the layers, as I mentioned, in IoT stack, and considering security when choosing a protocol is a must. And like other layers as well. So you have the sensors and devices, you have edge compute devices where with minimal compute powers and minimal protection. You need to consider your security measures for all those layers. So just to give some examples on IoT security breaches, the earlier examples I gave was, as I said, mainly from portals, from websites, etc. But there had been compromise on IoT systems as well. So maybe a famous one is Dyn attack, and it was the biggest botnet, biggest DDoS attack in the history, where many IoT devices were hacked simply because they were all using default credentials that were coming from the manufacturer. So hackers had compromised those devices, and they were all used to attack um, mainstream media websites, the social media, and many more. And the systems went down, and a large a large portion of internet was impacted by that. Another one is a cardiac health device, where false data was input into the system and given wrong information like attacks, etc. And the battery was able to deplete. Another one, maybe more scary, is baby heart monitoring device, which was compromised. It was only providing false data, thankfully, and not impacting the babies themselves, but providing false information. And maybe a scary one is a vehicle hack, where the hackers actually got into the system uh, by by putting code into over-the-air updates. So they had inserted vulnerable. They had inserted the virus into the code that was used to update the vehicle so that it's not compromised. But in a way, they managed to do that. And uh, as some of you might be familiar with, the vehicles they use CAN bus systems, and the hackers were able to remotely control the vehicle through that CAN bus system, CAN bus protocol, and which result in, of course, a very scary scenario there. So those are some of the examples from IoT world where there has been some breaches when security is not considered carefully. But and just to refer back to our supply chain story again, we say that IoT can become an enabler through digitalization, but an unsecure IoT solution can result in a total halt of business operations. So we are connecting the factories, the transport logistic vehicles, even sometimes the end customer, right, into the system. And if there is a breach to compromise, if there's a compromise against all of those assets or some of those assets, then it will halt the entire business operation. So instead of taking the advantage of digitization, we may even result in a worse situation. So what is the way out? I mean, do we stay where we are and try to keep safe, or should we find ways to overcome the barriers of achieving a more sustainable world? We understand that we cannot live an efficient world with traditional supply chain systems, and we need to progress onto the digital future. And thankfully, there are ways to go out from that route. These are some of the characteristics of a secure IoT solution. And on the first step, you can see I have put as step 0, where you have the human factor. You have you might have some credentials like username, password on a device, but as you've seen on the DDoS, the largest DDoS attack in the history, there is a human factor where they don't simply change the credentials, and because it is shared across the same devices, when you know one of them, which is the default, you can access the entire fleet of devices. So to overcome that, you can force policies, which sometimes does not work even in that case. But also you could adopt auto enrollment if possible. And that requires a sophisticated system. Of course, you have to plan from production line to the customer. But auto enrollment is an option to even overcome and skip the policies as well. Device and identity and access management practice is an essential. In the world of IoT, as I mentioned, the products have an ID, but the assets also have IDs, and they should have unique IDs in order to identify even vulnerabilities themselves, and also provide a secure access management. So thankfully, the device authority has products that could be utilized in providing an identity to the devices and to the assets as well. User identity and access management, again, not only devices, but the users and all the systems that are using the solution should have a unique ID for traceability and for operations. Network security. So firewalls is quite known, right? So, but in many cases, this is forgotten, and those configurations, those basic configurations, are not done, and hence opens doors to compromise. On application side, so as I mentioned earlier, there's a stack of technologies, and of course there's an application that sits on top of all those data capturing and processing mechanisms. So there are some good practices out there on the market, on the community. Those OWASP practices should be utilized. And provide identity services on application layer as well, have TLS and API security as well. As I mentioned on the Zigbee example, so over-the-air and over-the-air updates and patching is necessary. So you might have the most secure system in the world, but in some years of time, hackers will find a way to get in. So you better have access to the fleet of assets and devices to do those updates and do the patching for future, and not even for the future. Having that access to the asset in a secure way will allow for increasing the capabilities of an asset or of a device, for example, through software updates or firmware updates as well. So one of the most important things probably for IoT security is legislation. So we had seen some legislation from US where the companies were where the state was had put some criteria on what kind of devices they could purchase or what level of security it should have that they could utilize. So later on, we had seen some examples in Europe, and also thankfully UK is progressing on that legislation as well. So to force to force the companies to have some certain security level on the solutions they provide. This is actually this title is mistyped. Apologies for that. But there is an act in effect from 6 December 22. It's a telecoms legislation, and it requires some minimal minimal measures for security, such as requiring a username and password. That is, of course, not sufficient. As I mentioned earlier, the botnet attack was utilized by using default username and passwords. So it should go beyond that and actually force policies to either change their credentials or to go through a higher level of security. And we also have another act that will be in effect from 29th of April 2024 that recognizes IoT as a more let's say real in life technology, and it's putting some measures on that to improve the security as well. So thank you for that once again, and thanks for the opportunity to Device Authority for allowing to present here. I will be looking into the questions now if there are, and I will stop sharing. Just going to the security area right now. Okay. Okay, so I don't see any questions coming in, but do reach out to us through the social media or through the company if you have any questions. Thank you for the opportunity once again to Device Authority, and thank you for joining me today. I hope you have a great evening. Thank you.